Hello everyone, we're going to discuss balance and how I would fix the game. So starting off, I would have a public test realm, so either a mod, a ladder, or a beta build, or whatever, where people can play on the proposed changes before they are pushed through. Right now it's very cloak and dagger, very hush-hush. There's only a few people who really have access to what's being changed or what's being proposed, and I don't think that's generally good for the game. Secondly, I would change something about the maps. So these are the actual changes I would want to see on such a public test realm. The minimum starting hunt, I would like to see 1500 without changing the total amount of food available in the base. I would also like to see that husbandry does no longer affect the chicken gather rate. The reason for this is that right now you can go to chickens after your hunt, and if you have husbandry researched, it's almost exactly the same gathering rate. So oftentimes it's even better to do that because you have less walking time. I don't think that's good for the game. And the gather rate on berries and chickens, I would also like to see decreased an additional 5% compared to hunt. I think that would be better. And then I would like to see -2 berries and -1 chicken. I think that is the correct ratio because you have to keep in mind Ra likes berries, Norse likes chickens because of the favor they give. So I think that would be great to keep the total amount of food in base unchanged. So just to expand a little bit on the first point, because I think it requires some elaboration, the minimum starting hunt is currently 1200, although some maps can have more. For example, Megalopolis can have 2150 on the max roll. Nile Shallows, you start with either 3 or 4 hippos. It's a 50% chance. So you either have 1200 food or 1600 food. But some maps, such as Alfheim, have 1200 starting food always. And this is the minimum starting food that you will see, or starting hunt, I should say. The problem is that this kind of forces you into a certain build order, and you can't really deviate too much for it, because after clicking advanced to the classical age, you want to do something with your food. You want to create heroes if you are Norse or if you are Greek. Maybe you want to research hand axe. So you're really kind of forced into a certain advance time with very minimal deviation, which I don't think is good for strategic diversity. That is why I would like to see the minimum starting hunt change from 1200 to 1500, which would be like 2 extra there, for example, because they're 150 food each. So compensatory buffs would be to Odin Great Hunt and Poseidon Lure. We will talk about this a little bit later, but this is just because if there is more starting hunt now, these god powers are relatively worse, right? So Pantheon changes. I have 2 slides with Pantheon changes. The second one is about units. This one is more about global things. So I would like to see Thor and Freyr and maybe Loki get 1 raven from the temple upon it being built. The reason for this is that they really lack scouting, especially if they don't go Freya, and there are many situations where you do not want to go Freya. So you don't really know what the opponent is doing. You have very poor scouting possibilities. If you get 1 raven, that would obviously fix the issue, or at least help with the issue, I should say. Another option could be to have TCs that are built being announced or visible, for example, next to the score as it was in Legacy, but this is more of a, I feel like this is a bigger change and something that the devs wanted to get away from. So that is something that maybe is not that viable. The reason why I have Loki between parentheses here is because Loki already has really good scouting, and he is kind of disliked from a thematic point of view. He's like the trickster god, kind of the dark child, the black child of the family, so to say. So he could, for example, not have access to either Hugin or Munin, which is the names of Odin's ravens. For the attacking with buildings generates favor, and then between parentheses, perhaps only versus animals. This is just so you can shoot your starting hunt with your town center and not feel like you're wasting favor. Because right now you either have to shoot it with your villagers, which means you're wasting resource time because they have to go through the animation. And in the case of aggressive hunt, you're actually losing a lot of favor because you're attacking with your town center, right? If you're luring towards your TC. And for the Greek, can build 1 additional hero at twice the cost. This is only after you have made your own hero for that age. And you can always make only 1 additional hero. So if you are in classical, you do not get and an extra archaic hero and an extra classical hero. You get 1 extra hero and you have to choose from whichever age you are in or have already passed. So in this case, if you are Poseidon, you can build Theseus, and then if you have built Theseus, you can create either Ajax or Jason, for example. And similarly, if you are in classical and you want to create another hero, you can choose between an extra archaic hero or an extra classical hero. Egyptians, empowering tower/TC does not increase firing rate. This is mostly a Ra nerf because it feels really bad when you try to pressure Ra, especially forward town centers, and just everything is empowered. Doesn't really feel good to me. And he kind of gets that for free as well because of the monument just empowering everything. So it really kills aggressive play, I think. Ra could use a nerf anyway. Pantheon 2, so these are the units. Catapultus hit points, -5. I think that's reasonable. If you look at the Herdman, for example, the Herdman has 90 hit points for comparison. The piece armor from 10% to 5% for the Catapultis. Again, the Herdman has 5% piece armor. Now, the Herdman is faster, actually. But I should note that for the Catapultus, if you research Weightless Maze from Oceanus, you get a movement speed increase. If you turn them into heroes, they get a movement speed increase. If they are on Lush with Gaia and you have Channels Research, they get a movement speed increase. The Oranos upgrade, Empyrean Speed, movement speed increase. See where I'm going with this? So I feel like they should be a little bit weaker. They feel strong both on paper as well as in practice. They could use a nerf. Greek, Petrobolos costs significantly decreased. This unit is just really bad. And it doesn't help that it builds from the fortress. So imagine a situation where a Norse player grabs a forward town center and then doesn't do anything with it. So just builds the town center and just leaves it there. Now, if you are, for example, Hades and you create a fortress, you are down 300 wood, 300 gold, and 10 favor, and then you create one Petrobolos, and you siege down that forward town center uncontested with that one Petrobolos, you are now actually behind in one way or another in resources. So it just doesn't feel good to me that that's possible. You don't really have a good way of dealing with buildings as Hades or Poseidon unless you go Artemis and you earthquake them. So I think it is in order to reduce the cost. You also have to keep in mind that Petrobolos are useless in an actual fight, but they do take a population and they are incredibly expensive. Now, of course, a fortress does have some other benefits, like you need it at some point eventually to go to the Mythic Age. It is a stationary defense, so it can be useful tactically. But generally, it's just not cost effective to make Petrobolos to siege down like a forward hill fort or town center. So you get into these situations where certain civilizations, they kind of get like a forward position and you just can't really do much against it. And I think this would definitely help. The Egyptians, I just noticed I spelled Petsobek and Petsukos interchangeably, but basically the multiplier against heroes is currently 0.25. I think that should be 0.1. They sometimes just do really well against heroes when they are messed, and I don't think that should be the case. There's also a bug between parentheses where they deal an initial damage and then they deal an extra damage of 8 at least over time, regardless of the target. So I tested this in the editor where I cast Frost on a hero and they still dealt 8 damage over time. So the armor doesn't actually matter. This is the minimum damage that they deal on top of their initial damage. And their initial damage seems to match it seems to match what the tooltip says. So again, there is something going on there, and it doesn't feel good to see like 8 Petsuchos from, 26 range, focus fire a Son of Osiris and deal substantial damage. I don't think that's proper game design. Loki, lots of changes here. So first of all, Heimdall, Undermine deals reduced damage to unbuilt TCs and village centers. I don't think it's good game design, once again. To have this interaction where there isn't really much counterplay to it, because you don't know where the spy is at. You don't know whether the person is advancing with Heimdall in case like you're advancing first and you're grabbing a TC. You don't exactly know whether you should send a lot of villagers or not. If the Loki goes Heimdall and casts Undermine on your TC or village center, you're just basically dead with all of the resources and time lost. And of course, Odin can do this too, don't get me wrong, but it's especially a Loki problem. So I feel like there should be a damage penalty of undermine against unbuilt TCs and village centers. It doesn't feel right. Next is Forseti, the Dwarven breastplate upgrade, also researchable from Longhouse. So also researchable from Longhouse. You can still research it in the armory, but you can now also get it from the Longhouse. This is just so Loki has easier access to it. And we have, I guess, changed it, although I see it more as a nerf. The intention was to nerf it, to reduce the 20% hack vulnerability to 10% hack vulnerability, but give them a 10% pierce vulnerability boost as well. And the reason for this is this only affects berserks and herdmen, and they're usually going to be fighting things like cavalry, murmillows, that type of stuff. So I think it's currently too strong. And actually in the Thor against Atlantean matchup, this is probably the main reason why that matchup feels so one-sided, favoring Thor, of course, because the berserks and such, they're just so strong against the Murmillo. Next, we have the Hall of Thanes no longer improves hero speed by an additional 5%. I feel like we should take this away because I feel like it's too much, and also we can distinguish Loki now from Thor by giving that 5% back in the unique deck, which we will get to in a little bit later. From Loki, I have also removed the extra bonus damage. Loki got 20% extra bonus damage on heroes and human soldiers, and I have removed the 10% faster building bonus. These things really work in the background. You don't really feel them necessarily, so I don't think it's a good bonus. I think it's kind of bad game design. There's no agency, it's just something that's there in the background. Bonuses should feel impactful. You should maybe be able to play around it. It should feel good. Like I've never felt like 10% faster longhouse or whatever house building is like, wow, it's so amazing, you know, or even the extra bonus damage. So to give a little bit back for that, Eyes in the Forest is now an innate bonus, but specifies land units. That's just in case Loki would get the Raven. I guess it also affects Nidhogg, but it's not really relevant. This is just so, because it's so cool. It's so cool and unique. I think it would be really nice, especially during early scouting. Now the new tech, of course, because we have to replace Eyes in the Forest, would be to make heroes move 5% faster, which is not much, but they would also gain a +1 to multiplier against myth units. So giving a little bit back in the bonus damage that they used to have, but only for heroes, which again, I think fits Loki. Next, Thor. Forseti, same as Loki, and remove Hammer of Thunder. The reason why we remove this is because right now it's too easy for Thor to justify making a lot of Herseers. And I don't think it's good game design, because again, you can just make a bunch of them. It doubles the favor gathering rate from them when they are just existing. And it gives them, I think, plus 15% damage. And you have to keep in mind, with Retold, Thor has armory upgrades in Archaic already. So on top of that, armory upgrades affect heroes more. And then if you go Freya, or Forseti even, because even they get like a boost, you are getting very strong Herseers. And I just don't think that's good, that Thor can just make Herseers without any thought. Because what it was like previously is you had to make the right amount of Herseers. You wanted like a few for the early myth units, maybe if you were facing Atlanteans and they were going like Prometheans, you would make like maybe a few more. You would not want to make too many. You would want to go into other units. Right now, you can just make a bunch of Herseers as Thor, and it's always going to be fine because they are so strong. So I think it makes Thor slightly too strong. And I think it also takes away from strategic diversity because, again, what's more, you don't really have to think. You can just make a bunch of Herseers. You're rarely making too many Herseers now. So this would be replaced with a unique temple tech. Again, this can be anything, but to stay with the theme, I think thematically, Dwarves move 10% faster would be nice, but just a suggestion. Freyr. So Uller, Servants of Glory, the idle movement speed bonus build-up now extends to units which are building. So if you don't know, this upgrade, it gives longhouse units 5% movement speed, but then when they are idle, so just standing still, they build up movement speed, and then as soon as they start moving, it slowly decays. The problem is, of course, why would you have idle military for no reason? Unless you are like a bad player. But if you extend it to units which are building, which technically they're still in one place, even though they're not idle, that would actually be somewhat noticeable and it would kind of be cool. So that would be my suggestion. Tempest, ineffective against siege. It's already really hard to push Uller with like siege, but Tempest makes it even worse because Tempest is so good against siege. You can cast it on top of like 2 or 3 Petrobolos and it just kills them instantly. You can't run away, you can't do anything. And that would be with the old cost, be like 600 gold, 450 wood down. And keep in mind, if you are making ranged siege, you have to make more than usual, right? Because Freyr can repair for free with gatherers and dwarves as well. So you have to make multiple. On top of that, if you're doing like an Ancestors plus Eclipse siege push on a particularly greedy Freyr, you already have to be careful because of Gullen Bursty, but with Tempest as well. Like it just kills all of your siege towers immediately, and you can't retreat either because again, siege towers are so slow and they're slowed even more by the Tempest. So I feel like there should be something specifically aimed at Tempest and its effect on siege. Maybe it should not affect it at all. Maybe it should not slow them. Maybe, I don't know, the damage should be greatly decreased, like a negative damage multiplier, something like that. But something should be changed, I think, because currently, defensively, I think Freyr has too many options against the siege push. Then Gullen Bursty. Invoking Gullen Bursty currently has like a meteor slash shockwave effect on units. I think that should just be completely removed. It's already really strong. And decrease the research time of Valgalder and Granite Maw. So this is more to, again, promote strategic diversity. There are situations with Freyr where I want to make Draugr and their upgrade. Again, Valgalder is the Draugr upgrade from Uller. But I just can't justify it because I think it's 75 seconds. And then, of course, I have to make the Draugr as well. By that time, I could be like on the way to Heroic, and then I may as well wait a little bit longer and make Rock Giants, right? So I would like there to be a situation where I want to go Draugrs and I can justify going Draugrs. And I think that would be good for the game instead of just waiting for like a longer period. And when it comes to Granite Maw, that is the upgrade for the Rock Giants that turns them into Bergrisi, the building eating variant. It's the exact same reasoning. You're already competing with the other temple upgrade, which gives town centers and hill forts a passive auto gather rate of 1 foot per second, similar to like Plenty Vault. And it gives also an AoE heal. Now you could research this from a hill fort, of course, but even when you do that, you have a temple that needs to create rock giants, and you have a temple that needs to research Granite Maw. And again, potentially the Banquet upgrade for the passive income. So the temple is just overworked. So you either build like another temple, and if you are building another temple, I'm kind of feeling like I could also just save a little bit more and build an extra hill fort and just go mythic. And then I will just repeat the same thing where I queue all of the upgrades. Then when I hit mythic, I will wait like a minute, maybe 2 minutes for everything to finish. Then I will make ballista and win the game, right? And again, it's just such one-dimensional gameplay that you're pushed in because you are not provided with these timing windows. And I think the main cause of that is because these upgrades take quite a long time. Because rock giants, or Dagrisi I should say, they can really change the game. And they often do. But I feel like sometimes you could have gone for them, but just because it takes so long, you're better to just jump mythic and save your favor. I mean, it just doesn't feel that great to me. Odin, Great Hall builds 30% faster. I don't know if this is just me, but whenever I'm playing Norse and I'm building both longhouses and Great Halls, the longhouse finishes like 10 years before the Great Hall. And the funny thing is, Odin, if you look up his bonuses, it actually says that he focuses on Great Hall units. But the only Great Hall bonus that he gets is that units generate plus 25% favor in battle, Great Hall units, that is. Which, I mean, I've It's like a really boring bonus, right? Doesn't really impact much at all. So I think this would be very noticeable, and I think this would get like that extra boost that Odin needs. The unique deck is currently very bad. I think it's difficult to really buff this without making it suddenly overtuned, because it scales so dramatically that you get these outliers slash niche cases where it will be too strong, and in others it will be useless. So I think it just needs to be reworked. Can't really think of anything that would fit thematically, but yeah. Great Hunt buff, again, as outlined in the beginning, there is more starting hunt now. So in comparison, Great Hunt is less valuable, even though it's the same. So it should be a little bit stronger in Archaic, is all I'm saying. And then we have the Raven buff, because again, if we are giving the other Norse gods, or at least some of the other Norse gods, a Raven, then obviously Odin's Raven should be better. So he should get 2, of course, but I think the respawn rate should be increased at least. Probably comparable to Hermes' Winged Messenger, where his Pegasus respawns really quickly after being destroyed, or killed, I should say. It's a unit after all. And maybe also something about line of sight or speed, that this is also slightly buffed. So everyone has like a Raven, which fulfills its purpose, but then Odin has like better Ravens, right? I think that would be fine. Then Odin would probably be fine. For Ra, berry gathering rate plus 5%. This is just to offset the nerf in the beginning, so nothing actually changes. Then for Bast, I would have Eclipse no longer boost Locust Swarm. I think this is slightly too strong. And again, Ra is pretty strong at the moment. I would also have Eclipse no longer boost Monument Favor Generation. Again, we kind of want to decrease the amount of favor that Ra gets because the Sphinx strategy is a little bit overpowered. And I would say that empowering a monument no longer increases favor generation for Ra. So again, a Ra issue, because if you're empowering one monument, you're also empowering all other monuments in your base. And especially together with Eclipse, like this adds up really quickly. So I think this, together with like some of the other changes I've made, would probably make it fine, but we would have to see. Sets, probably the worst god at the moment. We have to keep in mind though that with the indirect buff to hunting, because we are nerfing other food sources, so as a result hunting gets stronger, Set will most likely be a little bit better already. But I think that if we remove the 25% food loss on conversion, I think that would be the buff that Set needs. It also makes sure that you don't really have to think about whether you want to convert food or not, because I know that when I've played Set, I've been in a position where I want to convert a source of food, but realistically, I could also see myself hunting that in the future. So it's kind of like, do I convert it? Do I not convert it? And it just doesn't really feel nice to make a decision either way. So this would just eliminate that. I think this would be a pretty feel-good buff. Next, we have Isis. Again, because of the gather rate nerf on berries and chickens, I feel like Isis would be hit by that the hardest from the Egyptians. So I would have the research discount applied to aging up. I think that would help. Poseidon. So the problem with the heroes, now that you can create an extra hero, is that in its current state, you would just always make Atalanta. There would be no thought whatsoever behind anything. It's just you're a Greek in classical, you have 2 heroes out, you need an extra hero, it is going to be Atalanta. That's just how it is. So what I would like to do is to specialize the heroes so they are more different from each other. So you can actually choose and make a strategic decision instead of just picking Atalanta because it's the best hero. So in this case, we are maximizing Atalanta for speed and like kind of chase down ability. So from 5.6 to 5.9, the damage goes from 12 to 10. This is a substantial change because keep in mind the multiplier is pretty big on Greek heroes. So against myth units, this is actually a significant decrease in DPS. And the range, a lot of people don't notice, Atalanta has 1 range, it's not melee. I would like to see that buff to 1.5. I think that would be nice too. And then you have like a specialist unit that's fast and good at running down units and being speedy in general. And fun fact, by making it 5.9 speed, you put it on par with the Hippicons, or Hippeus, I should say, I guess. So you're not slowing down any units when you're grouping your Atalanta with your horses. Next, the Hetaeros nerf should be reverted, but for 1v1 only. Currently, you don't really have a good late game win condition as Poseidon. You do as Zeus because you have the Medusa with the burning pitches, which is really good. Hades has the belly bows, the Castrafetos, I think they're called. And Poseidon has nothing at the moment because Hetaeros are no longer really viable. Again, this was only really an issue in low-level team games. So just make it so that in 1v1 games, this is like they are the same as before the nerf. They were nerfed from 10 hack damage to 8, by the way. But after all of the upgrades and such, this is actually quite a big deal. And of course, the lure buff, same thing as with Odin's Great Hunt. More starting hunt means this is weaker overall, so it should be buffed a bit. Hades, again, specializing heroes. So Achilles already is in the middle of the 3 classical heroes with all of its stats. So I think as it is kind of like a cavalry-ish unit, because it's on a horse, I think if we increase the Pierce armor, we kind of get like a middle of the pack hero. So if you need just like a general hero, but maybe something that is less likely to be focus fired by archers or something, you can get Achilles. That would be great. And I have the Athena nerf because Restoration is really strong, and every time I see someone recast it, I'm a little bit caught off guard because I feel like they shouldn't be able to, but of course they are recasting it, so they are able to. It's just such a strong god power. I just don't feel like it should be that cheap to recast, even now after the nerfs. So I think from 100 to 120 is fair. Zeus, so same story for the heroes. Hit points increased, damage increased, but speed decreased. May need some extra adjustments, maybe like slightly less speed even to really specialize it as like a beefy frontline hero. Athena, same thing as with Hades. Kronos, time shift. So dock time shifting behavior should behave the same as in single player. This is actually kind of a carryover from Legacy, because in Legacy, so Age of Mythology, the Titans, in single player, you could also shift docks pretty much wherever you want. But as soon as you go to multiplayer, they have to face the same direction. I don't know of any other mechanic in both games where there is this difference between single player and multiplayer. So it's very unique in that sense. But I also think it's just uncool that you can't like shift on Anatolia from one side to the other. Granted, it would be incredibly strong, but it would be incredibly cool. So I think we should allow that. Manor, so does not boost TC build time. The reason for that is I feel like you cannot always properly prevent a Kronos player from building a town center. So again, it reduces agency. You just kind of have to accept that they are going to get a town center up with like some build orders. I don't think that's good game design. So again, I would like to see that removed. And then the construction bonus can be from 25% to 40%, because then we can make it a little bit stronger. And you would still notice this construction bonus. Next, the double myth unit bonus. I would have it affect dock myth units, because again, why not? It seems pretty cool. And then the trade or recharge time from 180 seconds to 120 seconds. Reason for this is because it's probably the weakest heroic age god power of the Atlanteans. So it could use some love. Deconstruct no longer affects docks. Again, we need to take some power away on water after this. And it should also not affect special buildings. I don't know if this has already been fixed, but I know that you can cast it on some buildings. I've seen Chemo do that on stream. Doesn't feel good. Also, no longer on docks. This is also very Civ specific. If you are Norse, for example, your Berserk is already overloaded with what it has to do. Building docks, building houses, ideally, technically you can use a villager, scouting, building a temple, etc. Especially on like Anatolia, where you want to dock both sides. You just can't really do that against Kronos. I guess if you're Husk Supper, you already only dock one side. That is also why you never win major tournaments, because you do stuff like that. But that's beside the point, of course. Let's stick on topic. We should probably remove the deconstruct on docks. I don't think it's fair. It doesn't feel good. It's too much of a wild card. And we have Oranos. So when you shockwave units, if you don't reissue a command to them, they just stand idle, which is annoying because spamming attack move in Retold is actually bad because units will kind of like stutter when they do that. So I also feel like this is disproportionately effective against noobs who don't have as much APM. So this would just be a general good change. And then we have Caladria. The slow ability should be removed. The reason is because, again, it takes away agency. If I have like an early Valkyrie or Anubite or Sphinx or Centaur, just any unit really, and I want to kind of poke around my enemy base, I can't do that if the enemy has a Caladria out, because if it tags me, I'm taking a lot of damage. Or if like the enemy has two Caladrias, for example, I can just lose my unit straight up, and it feels really, really bad. Similarly, if I want to scout to see what the opponent is doing, or even if I want to raid, like take a few cavalry units and go raid, because of the Caladria, like I can just lose those units. It feels so bad. And I think that's very bad game design to incentivize that. So I would like to see the slow ability removed. Now the slow ability actually also decreases the rate of fire of units, so the attack speed. So we need to give something back. And I would say that the burst heal animation should be decreased by 50%. So it should take about half as much for the burst heal to go off. And again, this is to make it better to micro. Similarly, attack move, it should prioritize healing and not actually moving to the location. I think that would be a great change. And for Gaia, I have no changes except the same Caladria change, which is really an Oceanus change if you think about it. So that's it. Now, things I would look out for, because again, theoretically, this would be on some sort of test realm, right, where people can test, is whether Fossetti Herdman are too strong. That's possible. Whether Huskals are too strong. Whenever I say this, people laugh, but it's really because they're using like 4 Huskals against 20 Toxote, or because Chariot Archers are overperforming, right? That's why people think Huskals are weak. But Huskals are actually quite strong, and they also built incredibly quickly after the recent buffs to them. So that's something I would look out for. Alluvial Clay being too strong, for those that don't know, that's the Promethean upgrade that gives them 3 offsprings and I think also an HP buff. I think it's kind of sleeper OP at the moment, probably too strong. Next, whether Kronos is overbuffed on water or not. Again, when I was discussing Kronos, I would be like, oh, this would be so cool. But in following kind of what would be cool, maybe it's also too strong. So I would look out for that, because you don't want to be in a situation where if you see a water map and you want to play Atlantean, you would be stupid if you didn't pick Kronos. Like, that would be a bad situation, right? Next, whether Loki is overbuffed in general. Of course, we did take away some things, but we also gave him some things. So that is something to look out for, whether he's overperforming, because he's already very strong. And Egyptian not strong enough. And then I'm mostly looking at Set or Isis. Especially Isis, because again, we are taking away gather rate on berries and chickens, which means that if you can go outside of your base, you are stronger now relative to what you were before, which is a good thing. But Isis likes to stay in her base. So that is kind of the issues that I'm having at the moment. And yeah, let me know what you think.